Now they're broke and panicking without me. Daughter begs on Facebook. Dad, please come home. My cold revenge? Lawyers and silence. Forced to wear King of Letdowns. Crown and mocked on my 50th by wife and daughter. I smiled, grilled their food, then walked out forever. 50 years, half a lifetime of reliable routines, careful planning, and sacrifice dressed as responsibility. 27 years of marriage, one daughter raised with every ounce of patience and restraint I had. A mortgage nearly paid off, an IT job I hated but kept for their security. I never asked for much, a small dinner maybe, a card, some genuine words from the people I'd quietly dedicated my existence to. What I got instead was a party I didn't want, and a crown I didn't deserve. It was handed to me in front of everyone I knew, friends, family, colleagues, a cheap gold paper crown with 3 words scrawled in thick black marker across the front, King of Letdowns. Laughter erupted, wild, unfiltered. Not teasing, not loving, just savage. My wife, Marlene, howled like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. The same woman I'd carried through years of failed side businesses, anxiety spirals, and messy family blow-ups, laughing like she'd just seen the best stand-up bit of her life. My daughter Olivia, who used to hold my finger so tightly I was afraid to move, now looked at me like I was a meme she made go viral. Even my brother Jeff, who has borrowed more from me than he's earned in 10 years, grinned and said, "Damn, that's cold. But kinda accurate, huh?" And there I stood, at my own milestone birthday, in my own house, expected to grill their food, wearing a crown that reduced my life to a punchline. Not a legacy, not respect, just a joke. I smiled. The same smile I'd used for decades to keep the peace. The one I wore through backhanded compliments, through every constructive comment from Marlene about my salary, my weight, my silence. The smile I gave Olivia when she sighed through my advice, too cool to pretend to listen. The smile that nodded through my brother's endless failures and made room for him on the couch. It was the smile of a man trained not to react, a man told that quietness was strength, that gratitude didn't need to be voiced, that sacrifice was just the role you played. But that night, under fairy lights and plastic cutlery, something inside me shifted. No, it didn't crack. It collapsed. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was something colder, heavier, like stepping into a truth I'd avoided for years. I wasn't the foundation of their lives, I was the utility, a background process, a human resource. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at the man who didn't know he was the joke. The man who spent decades showing up, reliable, invisible, and thought that would be enough. And the worst part? They thought I'd take it, that I'd grill their burgers, wear the crown, smile for photos, and clean up afterward. But not this time. As I stood there, fingers clenched tight around the tongs, paper crown digging into my scalp, a single calm thought settled into place like the final brick in a long, invisible wall. They have no idea what they've just done. And soon, they would. The party debris, crumpled napkins, half-eaten plates, the lingering scent of cheap beer and shattered dignity felt like the aftermath of a battle I hadn't even realized I was fighting until the final decisive blow. Marlene had drifted off to bed hours ago, oblivious or uncaring, leaving me to survey the wreckage alone. The garish gold crown lay discarded on the coffee table, catching the dim moonlight filtering through the blinds. Mocking me even in the silence, the laughter echoed, phantom-like in my ears. King of Letdowns. It wasn't just a joke. It was a verdict delivered by the people who were supposed to be my jury, my advocates, my sanctuary. I moved through the quiet house with a newfound, chilling clarity. The usual exhaustion that followed these events was replaced by a cold, hard resolve, settling deep in my bones. This wasn't impulsive anger. It was the inevitable outcome of 1,000 ignored sighs, 1,000,000 swallowed resentments. This was the system correcting itself. I didn't rage, I didn't weep, I simply acted. Upstairs, in the sterile glow of my office computer screen, the blinking cursor on the travel website felt less like an escape route and more like a declaration of independence. Oregon. Why Oregon? A half-forgotten work trip years ago, a fleeting memory of misty pines, quiet streets, and a small-town diner, Rosie's, that served a peach cobbler so perfect it felt like a moment of grace in an otherwise unremarkable week. It seemed impossibly far from the suffocating familiarity of this house, this life. One way. No return date. The click of the mouse confirming the booking was the quietest, yet most definitive sound I'd made in years. Packing was clinical. A duffel bag, not suitcases. This wasn't a vacation, it was an extraction. Clothes selected for utility, not sentiment. My laptop, my tool, my trade, a handful of worn paperbacks that had offered more reliable companionship than most humans I knew. Then Max, my loyal, unassuming golden retriever, currently snoring softly at the foot of the empty guest bed I often retreated to after Marlene's passive-aggressive salvos made our shared room feel like a battlefield. He looked up as I clipped on his leash, tail giving a tentative thump. There was no question of leaving him. Max saw me. His affection wasn't conditional. His loyalty wasn't transactional. He was family in a way the others had ceased to be. He deserved better than the collapsing regime I was fleeing. Quietly, we slipped out of the house before dawn, two fugitives seeking asylum from indifference. The note I left was deliberately concise, almost sterile. No accusations, no lengthy explanations they wouldn't have understood anyway. Just, I need to go. I don't think I've ever really been happy here. Take care of yourselves. Richard. I placed it centrally on the immaculate kitchen counter Marlene was so proud of, weighted down by my house key. The finality of that small, metallic clink against the cold granite resonated more profoundly than any shouted argument ever could. Let them find it amidst the remnants of their laughter. Let them wonder. The long drive west was a blur of anonymous highways and stale coffee. Max slept curled on the passenger seat, a warm, breathing anchor in the sterile silence of the car. With each mile marker that disappeared behind me, a layer of the old Richard seemed to slough off. The accommodating husband, the overlooked father, the reliable provider who swallowed his own needs. He was fading in the rearview mirror. What remained was something leaner, quieter, but undeniably present. I wasn't running away as much as I was driving towards a blank page, a chance to write a narrative where I wasn't just the supporting character. Ashbrook, Oregon, when I finally rolled in under a sky the color of wet slate, was exactly as I remembered. Unassuming, quiet, wrapped in the damp embrace of the Pacific Northwest. One main street drowsed under the drizzle, flanked by buildings that looked like they remembered the Eisenhower administration. Rosie's diner glowed like a warm beacon at the far end. Above a dusty antique shop, a small for rent sign hung slightly askew in a window. Darrell, the landlord, a man whose calloused hands and steady gaze spoke of a life spent fixing things more tangible than broken families, sized me up, asked few questions, and accepted 3 months' rent in cash for the small, furnished studio. It was sparse, smelling faintly of lavender polish and old wood, but the silence was profound. It wasn't empty. It was uncluttered. The first 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of deliberate anonymity. Early morning walks with Max along fog-shrouded streets, the drip of coffee brewing in the cheap pot, long hours spent staring out the window at the relentless green, reading books without interruption, sleeping dreamlessly for the first time in years. I didn't answer the blocked numbers that occasionally tried to pierce my new solitude. I didn't check social media. I was detoxing from a lifetime of their noise. The quiet wasn't lonely, it was restorative. It was in that quiet, surrounded by unfamiliar walls and the gentle rhythm of Max's breathing, that the cold resolve hardened into a plan. The king of Letdowns wasn't just abdicating, he was preparing to issue his own decrees. The receipts, literal and metaphorical, were all accounted for. The background character was stepping into the light, ready to rewrite the entire script, and they wouldn't see it coming until the stage collapsed beneath them. The initial piece of Ashbrook, that blessed, uncluttered quiet, soon became the fertile ground where the seeds of my long dormant resolve began to sprout. It wasn't enough to simply disappear. The king of Letdowns needed to ensure his former kingdom understood the true cost of his abdication. While they were likely still reeling from the shock of my empty space at the breakfast table, I was already meticulously cataloging the evidence of my reign, the reign they'd taken entirely for granted. My laptop became my war room. Spreadsheets materialized, documenting years of sole mortgage payments, utility bills automatically drafted from accounts only I managed, tuition checks cashed without a word of thanks, endless funds funneled into Jeff's black hole of perpetual financial incompetence, even the receipts for the damned groceries I bought every week while Marlene complained about the price of organic kale. Emails were unearthed, bank statements downloaded, screenshots captured. A digital fortress of proof brick by undeniable brick. This wasn't just catharsis, it was ammunition. Then came the first sign of life from the world I'd left behind. Not through a direct call, my number remained blocked, a silent sentinel guarding my newfound peace, but via the insidious reach of social media. A forwarded screenshot from a distant cousin I barely knew. It was Olivia's Facebook page. There, plastered for public consumption, was a carefully selected photo of us from her high school graduation. One of those rare instances where I was permitted within the frame, smiling that familiar, strained smile. The caption beneath it dripped with manufactured desperation. "If anyone sees my dad, please tell him we're sorry. We didn't realize how much we took him for granted. We just want him to come home." My stomach twisted. The sheer, calculated performance of it. The public plea for sympathy, conveniently omitting the years of private dismissal, and the crowning insult that had precipitated my departure. The comments section was a predictable maelstrom of shock and pity. Platitudes flowed freely from people who barely knew us. "He always seemed so quiet," or the ever-insightful, "You never know what someone's going through." And then, inevitably, Jeff chimed in, oozing false sincerity. "Man, I miss my big bro. Hope you're okay out there." This, from the man who'd gleefully affirmed my title as King of Letdowns just weeks prior. The man whose bar tabs and car repairs I'd funded for years. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I felt a cold, sharp spike of anger, quickly followed by a grim satisfaction. Let them perform. Let them posture. Their public narrative was already starting to fray at the edges, because nestled amongst the sympathetic drivel were quieter comments, ones Marlene hadn't yet managed to delete. I always thought Rich deserved better from a former coworker, and saw what happened at that party. Wasn't cool, from someone I didn't even recognize. The truth had witnesses, even if they'd only whispered before. I didn't reply. I didn't react publicly. I simply saved the screenshot, adding it to my growing dossier, and returned to my work. The quiet hum of the antique shop below my studio was a more honest soundtrack than their online lamentations. But the silence couldn't last. An email slipped through my filters a few days later. Subject: urgent, about Dad. My heart gave a painful lurch. It was from Olivia. Hours passed before I could bring myself to open it. Max's head resting heavy on my knee, his quiet presence a comfort. "Please don't delete this," it began. What followed was different. Not the performative sorrow of her Facebook post, but something closer to genuine confusion, perhaps even remorse. She admitted the party, the crown, had seemed like harmless fun, a roast, that she hadn't realized how deeply it cut. She confessed she thought I always took jokes well, a testament to how effectively I'd masked my pain for her benefit. There was an apology, raw and less rehearsed, than her public one. "Now, you were always the one holding us together," she wrote, "and we let you become invisible. I'm sorry, Dad. I miss you." That email, that was a different kind of spike. Not anger, but a complex aching thrum beneath my ribs, a flicker of the old Richard, the father, wanted to respond, to soothe. But the new Richard, the one forged in the fires of their dismissal, held back. It was too soon. Her understanding was nascent, fragile, possibly still self-serving. I felt too much. Raw, conflicting emotions swirled like a storm. So, I simply saved the email alongside the others and picked up the phone. Not to call her, but to call Dale, our longtime financial advisor. My voice was calm, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. "Dale," I began, "I need to make some changes. Effective immediately, I want my name removed from all joint accounts with Marlene. Transfer all my investments, every single cent I personally contributed or inherited, into a new individual portfolio, under my name only." There was a weighted pause on the other end. Dale, a meticulous man who valued stability, sounded hesitant. "Richard, are you sure? That's a significant step. Does Marlene know about this?" His professional concern was palpable. "She will," I replied, the words tasting like cold steel and liberation. "She absolutely will." The first domino had been pushed. The quiet man was finally making some noise, even if only in the silent, unyielding language of finance. The kingdom's treasury was officially closed to the undeserving. Executing the financial separation felt less like revenge and more like recalibrating a dangerously unbalanced system. After calling Dale, our financial advisor, to split the accounts and investments, his surprise was palpable, but I was firm. She will know. I methodically halted the auto payments for the mortgage and all utilities, accounts only I knew how to access. I'd built their financial infrastructure. Now I was simply cutting the power grid I alone maintained. 3 days later, my burner phone exploded with blocked calls and messages from Marlene. I didn't listen. I could imagine the escalating panic. Then came the Facebook messages. Jeff, bro, WTF, gotta talk. Everything's falling apart. His fear was transparent. His financial safety net was gone. Marlene, Richard, what are you doing? This isn't funny. Come home. Her entitlement was astounding. She followed up with a public victim post, vaguely blaming me for abandoning the family, but it quickly backfired as comments surfaced, questioning her narrative and referencing the king of Letdowns crown. She deleted the post within hours, the cracks in her facade showing. The real-world consequences hit quickly. Jeff was denied another loan, no cosigner. Olivia received jarring notices about her bounced car payment. Funds from the joint account were cut off. She had to navigate the fallout alone. I wasn't being cruel. I was enforcing reality, forcing them to carry the weight they never acknowledged I bore. The tipping point came 2 weeks later via certified mail. Marlene's lawyer. She was filing for separation, claiming emotional abandonment, demanding hefty alimony as a sacrificed stay-at-home mother, and asserting rights to the majority of assets, including the house I'd solely paid for over 15 years. Reading it, I laughed. A loud, incredulous laugh. She had no idea about my archive of evidence. I immediately hired Arthur, a Seattle lawyer specializing in complex divorces, who valued facts over drama. In our first video call, I presented everything. 20 years of financial records, statements, emails detailing Jeff's debts, proof of my sole payment for everything from tuition to roof repairs. Arthur reviewed the files, impressed. Mr. Anderson, he said with a predatory gleam, this isn't just thorough, it's comprehensive. You weren't kidding about backups. I replied, I'm an IT guy, Arthur. Redundancy and documentation. He grinned. Hey, well, Marlene and her counsel are in for quite a surprise. We began building the counteroffensive, aiming not to destroy, but to dismantle her false narrative with irrefutable truth. Yet, a foolish sliver of hope for genuine remorse remained. Instead, I received a direct email from Marlene. Empty subject line. Body. I miss you. Even now, I still don't understand why you didn't just tell me you were unhappy. That spectacular feat of self-unaware gaslighting extinguished the last ember. Tell her? My silent suffering, my swallowed dreams, my quiet endurance? None of it had registered because I hadn't screamed. I forwarded it to Arthur. Exhibit A. She's still not getting it. Then came Olivia's voicemail, the one that nearly breached my defenses. I listened later, alone. Her voice trembled, stripped of its usual confidence. Dad, please pick up. Things are really bad here. A shaky breath. Mom's been freaking out since the utilities got shut off. Screaming at Jeff, he's drinking more in the basement. They fight all the time, it's loud. A near sob. She's trying to sell the house now, but the lawyer said she can't without your signature. She threw a vase this morning. Her voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with dawning understanding. I don't even feel safe here anymore, Dad. Please just call me. Let me know you're okay. A final choked whisper. I think I'm starting to understand why you left. I sat motionless. Max whined softly. She was seeing it. Finally seeing the toxicity I absorbed for years. Pain for her warred with my resolve. This changed nothing about the necessary course, but it signaled the endgame was near. It was time for the King of Letdowns to hold court. 3 months later, I stood on the marble steps of the county courthouse, wearing the only suit I owned, the same one I'd worn to Olivia's graduation, back when I still believed that being present meant something. The sky was clear, my hands steady, my chest quiet. The man I used to be, the one who apologized for existing, who absorbed insult after insult with a half smile and a dropped gaze, he wasn't here anymore. I had buried him. What walked into that courtroom was something else entirely. A man who had spent 30 years fading into wallpaper, only to step finally into center stage. Silent, sure, and unafraid. The courtroom itself was underwhelming. Low ceilings, fluorescent lighting, the faint scent of paper and bureaucratic decay. But the tension? That was real. It hung in the air like a storm, waiting for thunder. And then I saw her. Marlene. She sat in her corner like a grief-stricken widow in a discount courtroom drama. Head to toe in black, tissue in hand, her posture a performance. Our eyes locked. Hers were wet, but not from regret. More like panic wrapped in disdain. She looked at me like I was both the problem and the solution she couldn't control. I didn't blink. Her lawyer stood first, of course. Polished. Smug. He painted me as a cold, unfeeling man who abandoned his family without a word. He told tales of a wife who gave up career ambitions, read failed schemes and overpriced life coaching certifications, to raise a child scarred by paternal neglect. Marlene sniffled on cue, dabbing at dry eyes with theatrical precision. I stayed still. I'd heard this story before. Hell, I'd lived in its shadows. Then Arthur stood. No flair, no raised voice, just precision. He spoke like a surgeon cuts, clean and undeniable. He pulled up the spreadsheets first. 20 years of bank transfers, mortgage payments, school fees. Line after line, year after year. All with my name at the top and theirs at the bottom. Utility bills, grocery orders, Olivia's tuition, the co-signed loan, Marlene's mom's new roof, Jeff's bailouts. Every receipt was a grave marker in the cemetery of my silent sacrifices. And then, Arthur's masterstroke. He placed a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside, folded and slightly crushed, was the crown. King of Letdowns, still in bold black marker. Exhibit G, he said quietly, presented to my client by his family during his 50th birthday party. He read the accompanying Facebook comments aloud. Snide jokes, tone-deaf quips, digital daggers. The courtroom grew still. The judge's expression didn't change much, but the silence after Arthur's words said everything. And then came the line that made the entire room shift. My client didn't abandon his family. He simply walked away from a role where he was cast as the joke, stripped of dignity, and crowned with failure after decades of sacrifice. The gavel didn't slam yet, but you could hear it in the air. Marlene moved to speak, anger flashing through her mask, but the judge cut her off sharply. Mrs. Anderson, sit down. She sat, shaking. The performance was over. The audience no longer applauded. Then came the verdict. Measured. Final. The house would be sold. Proceeds split. 70-30 in my favor. Her alimony request? Denied. Her claims of abandonment? Labeled unsupported. Jeff, ordered to repay $18,000? Symbolic? Sure. But still, it was on record. Black ink truth. As the judge dismissed us, Arthur simply nodded. No grin, no gloat. Outside, as the courthouse doors shut behind me, I breathed in for what felt like the first time in years. Deeper, cleaner. The man they mocked, the man they crowned in sarcasm and shame, he'd just rewritten his title. Not in glitter, in justice. The gavel struck once, a sharp crack that echoed the finality of a door slamming shut on a long, bitter chapter of my life. Justice, stripped bare, had spoken. Outside the courtroom, in the sudden, almost deafening quiet of the hallway, Marlene intercepted me. Her eyes, once carefully weaponized to elicit sympathy or guilt, now burned with a raw, untamed fury. This isn't justice, she hissed, her voice tight with disbelief. You twisted everything. You deliberately made me look like the villain. I looked at her, truly looked, seeing past the performance, past the history, past the tangled web of expectation and disappointment. For the first time, perhaps, I saw her clearly. No, Marlene, I said, my voice quiet but steady, holding no trace of the old tremor. You just didn't expect anyone to finally see it. She staggered back slightly, as if the simple truth carried a physical force, capable of bruising. Then, recovering her brittle composure, she turned sharply, heels clicking in angry rhythm down the sterile hallway until the sound faded completely. I didn't follow. The urge wasn't even there. I never would again. Standing alone, the weight of decades didn't just lift. It evaporated, leaving a startling, almost unnerving lightness in its place. In the weeks that followed, I methodically dismantled the tangible remnants of the life we'd built. Like sorting through archaeological debris, closing joint accounts felt like severing phantom limbs. Selling off furniture online, each transaction felt less like loss and more like shedding unnecessary ballast. purely procedural, devoid of the stinging nostalgia I might have once expected. I sent Olivia enough to clear her car loan, attaching one non-negotiable condition via text: "It's yours now. Maintain it or don't. But the responsibility is solely on you." It wasn't about control. It was about finally cutting the cord, ending the cycle of dependence I'd unwittingly enabled for far too long. Her reply was brief, almost instantaneous. "Thank you. I understand." We spoke a few times after that, sparse fragments of conversation drifting across the miles. No blame exchange, no further requests made, just tentative check-ins. And that felt like enough. More than enough, perhaps. I stayed in Ashbrook, the small studio above the repair shop, smelling faintly of old wood, solder, and Max's contented sighs, became a sanctuary. My routine settled into a quiet rhythm. Took peaceful walks with Max along mist-shrouded streets, the only demands being the damp air on my face and the gentle pull of his leash. Rewired old radios in the back of the shop, losing myself in the tangible logic of circuits. A welcome antidote to the chaotic irrationality I'd escaped. Drank bitter coffee from mismatched mugs, the silence amplifying not loneliness, but a profound, grounding clarity. No noise, no roles left to perform. One dusky evening, months later, Olivia knocked on my door. Unannounced, tentative, but real. She brought peach cobbler from Rosie's and 2 plastic forks, an unspoken peace offering. We sat on the small porch overlooking the quietening street, the sky fading slowly from bruised orange to deep indigo. Talked about books we'd read, strange neighbors with stranger habits, a job she was thinking of quitting. Then, her gaze distant, she said softly, "I used to think you were weak." I didn't answer, just watched the first stars prick the darkness. She looked at me then, her expression open, searching. "You're not," she stated, a quiet certainty in her voice. "You were just surrounded by people who needed you to be." I met her eyes and nodded, just once, acknowledging the truth she'd finally uncovered, the truth I'd finally claimed for myself. No tears followed, no grand speeches were necessary. The air between us settled into stillness, and inside me, finally, unequivocally, peace.